Before you even hit play, I need you to lean in close because this is the single most important question you will ever face. Do you truly believe that the story of your soul ends when your heart stops beating? If you've ever felt an inexplicable fear, an undeserved joy, or a connection to a place you've never been, then you need to commit the next few moments to this journey. Take a breath, put on your headphones and let the outside world dissolve. Let's explore the shadow of your past and the blueprint of your future. What if every ache in your heart, every triumph you celebrate, and every obstacle that seems unfairly placed in your path is not random chance, but a perfectly delivered message from history? What if the life you are living right now is simply the consequence of choices made 100 years ago, by a version of you whose name you have long forgotten? This is the core of the ancient wisdom, the eternal balance known as karma, the quiet understanding that the universe keeps impeccable, unrelenting accounts. Consider the man named Elias. Elias lived in a modern, grey-hued city, the kind where the promise of opportunity often suffocates under the weight of concrete and competition. He worked a meticulous but mentally draining job as a data security analyst, a profession demanding absolute precision. Yet, despite his intelligence, diligence, and genuine kindness, his life was a tapestry woven with unexplained threads of sorrow and struggle. His greatest, most debilitating struggle was consistently financial. It wasn't just bad luck, it was a curse of near misses. He would pour months, sometimes years, into a complex software project, nurturing it toward profitability, only to have the key investor pull out at the 11th hour, or a regulatory change render the entire effort moot. He'd save a modest sum, enough to finally feel secure, only to face a sudden, massive medical emergency for his aging mother, wiping out his savings and plunging him back into the abyss of debt. He felt like Sisyphus, perpetually pushing the boulder of his life uphill, only to watch it roll back down just before the peak. This relentless tide of crushing reversals left him weary, profoundly cynical, and deeply questioning the existence of any just order in the cosmos. He had done nothing wrong in this life, yet the universe seemed perpetually aligned against his prosperity, withholding the basic security that others took for granted. The weight of this failure pressed on his chest day and night. He often found himself standing alone, perhaps on a balcony or looking out a window at the perpetual drizzle, staring up at the slate-grey sky, his mind reeling with the unfairness of it all. He would whisper the same hollow question to the empty clouds. Why me? What debt am I paying? There was never an answer, just the chill of the air and the empty echo of his own voice mocking his despair. But his life held another profound, crippling mystery, a deep, irrational, paralyzing terror of small enclosed spaces. His claustrophobia was not a mild discomfort. It was a sudden, violent, physiological seizure. He couldn't set foot in a small elevator without a wave of nauseating panic that felt like a heart attack in progress. He couldn't handle being confined in a storage room or even sit in the back seat of a small car for too long. Even the smallest airplane lavatory could trigger a cold sweat, hyperventilation, and a pulse that hammered against his ribs like a desperate prisoner. Medically, there was no diagnosis, no recognizable childhood trauma, no event he could recall that explained the severity of this fear. It was a primal, bone-deep existential terror of being trapped, sealed away, and forgotten. A panic so complete it threatened to steal his sanity. This combination, the crushing, unwarranted financial struggle and the suffocating physical panic, defined the narrow, suffocating boundaries of his entire existence. One particularly stressful night, having just lost another major contract, Elias sought refuge in a deep meditative state, a practice he had stumbled upon purely out of desperation to quiet his relentless anxiety. He focused on his breath, letting the noise of his modern life recede. As the world faded, the familiar walls of his apartment, the walls that had felt so confining moments before, melted away entirely. The sensation was not that of a dream. It was like a veil, thick and ancient, lifting from his perception. He was no longer Elias. The very essence of his consciousness shifted, and he was suddenly Theodore. Theodore was a figure of extravagant, self-serving excess centuries earlier, in a time when industry was brutally simple and human life was cheaply valued. He was a wealthy, influential owner of several deep-shaft mines nestled in a remote, mineral-rich mountain range. Theodore's wealth was not merely considerable, it was dictatorial. His prosperity depended entirely on the dangerous, back-breaking labor of the men he employed. He owned the earth they dug, the shacks they lived in, and the company store where their meager wages bled back into his coffers. He was in effect a petty king whose word was absolute law and whose only measurable deity was his boundless, insatiable greed. He was a man who measured his life's worth, not by his compassion, but by the weight of the gold beneath the earth and the ever-growing size of his ledger. He was known for being utterly ruthless, a fact he wore like a proud, heavy coat. The year was marked by a devastatingly harsh winter, and the ground was brittle, prone to shifting and settling. Theodore was informed by his chief foreman, a decent man named Thomas, that one of the deepest and most productive tunnels, morbidly nicknamed the Widow's Kiss because of the sheer number of lives it had previously claimed, was exhibiting terrifying signs of imminent catastrophic collapse. Thomas begged Theodore to halt operations, to evacuate the 42 men working that shift, and to immediately invest in the proper steel and timber shoring that the mine had desperately needed for years. Theodore, however, was expecting a colossal shipment of prime ore to a foreign buyer that very week, and stopping work for even 2 days meant missing a vital, lucrative deadline that would cost him a significant percentage of his annual profit. Theodore's face, usually flushed with the confidence of his status, hardened into a terrifying mask of granite. His eyes, cold and calculating, narrowed at Thomas's pleas. "The work continues, Thomas," Theodore announced, his voice low and absolute. "Those men are paid handsomely to dig. Their fear is their problem, not mine. If they are so superstitious as to believe in rumors, replace them. I will not lose a shipment of this magnitude over the possibility of an accident." Theodore then handed Thomas a meager bonus, a cynical gesture to soothe his foreman's conscience, and commanded him to return to the mine, ensuring the men worked faster, not slower. Thomas, knowing the grim truth of the unstable mountain and the callous disregard of his master, left with a spirit crushed beneath the weight of Theodore's decision. He felt the cold certainty of the crushing outcome before it even happened. The next day, the inevitable came, not with a quiet, slow subsidence that might have allowed for escape, but with a sudden, violent, deafening shuddering of the earth that tore the silence of the morning apart. The Widow's Kiss tunnel collapsed entirely, its deep, cavernous maw sealing shut with a groan so primal it felt as though the mountain itself were mourning. 42 men, fathers, sons, brothers, were instantly entombed, their fate sealed by an overwhelming mountain of rock and the callous, profitable indifference of one man. Theodore, standing safely outside the mine entrance, watched the dust cloud mushroom into the sky. He felt not grief, not terror, but a brief, sharp flicker of irritation. He was annoyed by the interruption to his lucrative operations, the significant cost of the replacement equipment, now buried beneath the rubble, and the troublesome, bureaucratic need to hire and train 42 new workers. He showed zero remorse, offered the bereft families nothing but a cynical pittance, and swiftly moved to silence the widows and children with threats of eviction from the company housing. He ensured the entrance to the collapsed tunnel was sealed quickly, permanently and thoroughly, a physical, undeniable barrier, yes, but also a metaphorical sealing of his own heart against the suffering he had inflicted. He trapped 42 souls for the sake of his immediate material profit, and then he utterly forgot them, returning to his life of luxury and endless acquisition. He never felt remorse, never paid the price, and died decades later in his grand, silk-sheeted bed, surrounded by his immense, ill-gotten wealth, believing himself to have been a triumphant success story, a man who beat the odds. The memory of Theodore's life, seen through Elias's eyes, was not just painful, it was psychically suffocating. The sheer, deliberate coldness of the act, the calculated indifference to human life, was a physical blow that left Elias hyperventilating. When he finally snapped back to his present reality, gasping for breath, the walls of his modern apartment seemed to press in on him, threatening to seal him in. The fear wasn't just claustrophobia, it was the psychic residue, the terrifying, indelible memory of being the one who sealed the door on others, the one who took away the life-giving gift of breath. The recurrent financial hardship that plagued his life as Elias was now revealed as the universe's precise, inescapable justice. In a life where he needed 42 men to survive, he had condemned them for money. Now, in this current life, the universe, with its perfect balancing symmetry, simply refused him the security of wealth, forcing him to understand dependence, vulnerability, and loss in a way Theodore never could. The balance demanded to be paid, ounce for ounce. This terrifying realization offered no immediate emotional comfort, but it brought absolute, crystalline clarity. Elias understood with sudden, chilling certainty that his life was not a punishment without cause, but a highly specific remedial lesson plan crafted by his own soul. The struggles were not random obstacles. They were the essential, painful tools of his spiritual education, the precise consequence of his past self's deliberate, grave errors. But the accounting of the soul is never simply debit and overwhelming credit. There is also immense, unquantifiable positive energy, a reservoir of grace built up over countless lives. Elias had always noticed that, despite his financial woes and general air of perpetual defeat, strangers were inexplicably, almost aggressively kind to him. The tired cashier at the local convenience store would often round down his bill or silently waive a fee. His landlord, an old, notoriously gruff man named Mr. Peterson, inexplicably forgave 3 full months of back rent during one of his worst downturns, citing only a vague feeling of duty. When his beat-up car once broke down on a desolate, remote stretch of highway in the middle of a blizzard, a professional towing engineer driving by not only stopped to fix the complex engine fault for free, but insisted Elias share his packed dinner and a flask of hot coffee. Elias had always attributed this to pure, random, statistical luck, a small counterweight to his mountain of bad fortune. Now he wondered if this inexplicable cascade of grace was another consequence, another life, another self remembered. He delved deeper into his memories, guided by the same deep stillness. The city melted, the mountains faded, and a new life unfolded centuries before Theodore's greed. He saw a young woman named Elara, living in a tiny, isolated village nestled deep in a fertile river valley, far from any center of power or wealth. Elara was not a queen, a warrior, or a hero of history. She was simply a caretaker, a skilled herbalist, a weaver, and a provider of comfort to her small community. Her life was defined by quiet service. Then a blight descended, a mysterious rapid sickness that withered the crops in the fields and, more terrifyingly, weakened the people. Panic spread faster than the disease itself. Fear turned neighbor against neighbor, and selfishness, masked as a survival strategy, began to tear the social fabric apart. Elara possessed the one thing the village desperately needed, a substantial, meticulously preserved cache of potent medicinal herbs, dried and stored food, and blankets, supplies meant to last her family, including her 2 young children and her cautious husband Marcus, for the entire winter and beyond. Marcus pleaded with her, his voice ragged with fear and desperation. "If you give it away, Elara," he argued, gripping her arm tight, "we will starve too, our children will freeze. You cannot save the entire village if it costs us everything. We must protect our own." The choice was an agonizing, soul-wrenching conflict between the primal instinct for self-preservation and the higher call of compassion. Her instinct screamed at her to hoard, to protect her family. But as she looked at the faces of the village children, hollow-eyed, shivering and feverish, she saw not strangers, but a collective body. She saw the potential for a collective future, or a selfish, comfortable, but ultimately isolated end. Elara made her final, irrevocable decision. She did not merely give away her supplies, she shared herself. She spent days, long, agonizing days, and sleepless nights, fueled by nothing but adrenaline and moral resolve, distributing the herbs, preparing small, nourishing broths for the weakest, and tending to the sick, often touching their feverish skin despite the danger. She never slept more than an hour at a time. She ran herself ragged, moving from hut to hut, ignoring the mounting exhaustion and the rapidly fading reserves in her own storehouse. She was, for that terrible, brutal period, the lifeblood and the moral center of the village. She poured out every ounce of her personal resource, her food, her precious herbs, her physical strength, her time, her very will, until the blight finally, mercifully, receded. The village survived. The crops, newly planted, began to sprout under the spring sun. The people regained their strength and began to rebuild their lives. Elara, however, did not recover. Having spent her own physical reserves beyond the point of return, and having contracted a milder form of the blight while caring for others, she grew weaker even as the village grew stronger. She did not starve or freeze. She simply faded away, alone in her quiet hut, having given the last of herself to the collective good. Her end was peaceful, a quiet departure. Her immense contribution unseen by the outside world, acknowledged only by the memory and the healed bodies of the villagers she had saved. She had died with nothing material to her name, but she departed with a spiritual ledger brimming with pure, unadulterated, life-affirming compassion and service. The vision of Elara's sacrifice washed over Elias like a powerful, cleansing wave of recognition and sorrow. That was the source of the inexplicable kindness. That was the reason the universe, through the anonymous, helpful hands of random strangers, consistently kept him from the absolute brink of ruin, providing grace precisely when he needed it most. In a past life, he, as Elara, had ensured the survival of others at the cost of his own comfort and final moments. Now, in this life, when his material survival was threatened by Theodore's ancient negative balance, the universe ensured he would always be met with a cushion of unexpected grace. The cycle of karma wasn't a blind punishment machine. It was a cosmic gyroscope, always striving for essential, undeniable equilibrium. This realization fundamentally changes how you look at the people around you. It offers a profound explanation for one of life's strangest mysteries: the instant, deep connection or chilling repulsion we feel when meeting a stranger for the very first time. Have you ever encountered someone and felt an immediate, overwhelming sense of familiarity, as if your soul already knew theirs, skipping the need for introductions? This is often called soul recognition, the unmistakable, resonant, karmic echo of a bond forged in a previous existence. The intense wave of instant affection or sympathy you feel is the deep residue of a past loving friendship, a faithful partnership, or a shared heroic struggle in the trenches of history. It's the sacred moment when two souls, separated by the immense gulf of time and space, instantly recognize the unique, ancient frequency of their positive history. They are old friends, reunited for the next part of the journey. Conversely, the sudden, inexplicable wave of antipathy, that cold, visceral, knee-jerk rejection of a person you've just met, someone who has done nothing to offend you, is rarely arbitrary. It is the immediate, unconscious recognition of an old enemy, a deep-seated rivalry, or the presence of an ancient, unresolved betrayal. The universe, in its meticulous pursuit of total balance, often brings these figures back into your orbit, forcing you to interact, to confront the tension, to finally heal the rift, or perhaps to settle the score without repeating the old mistakes. These initial, powerful feelings are simply your soul's internal filing system, instantly categorizing the relationship as either unfinished business or a joyful, necessary reunion. Elias began to see his entire life not as a prison sentence, but as a profoundly complex equation. His claustrophobia and financial instability were the heavy negative weights of Theodore, demanding accountability and teaching him the essential value of breath, freedom, and collective security. His random luck and the unsolicited kindness were the shining positive weights of Elara, ensuring he never forgot the immense power of selfless action. His encounters with both friends and rivals were the universe's way of bringing old players back to the stage, forcing him to engage with the karmic consequences of his own history. This beautiful, terrible truth utterly dismantles the concept of victimhood. Nothing is done to you that is not, on some fundamental level, returned to you. You are not a passive recipient of fate's random dice roll. You are the meticulous architect of your own multi-life history, and every single moment you experience is a consequence of a choice, either made 5 seconds ago in this life or 5 millennia ago in another. The present moment is simply the single central point where all those ancient threads converge. This truth fundamentally changes how one must live. If this life is merely a result, then the only meaningful purpose, the only true spiritual work, is to focus entirely on the cause, the action you are taking right now. The current struggles, the debts owed to Theodore, cannot be magically erased, but they can be managed and mitigated by the actions taken today. If the fear of being confined persists, Elias must work every day to ensure he is giving freedom, opportunity, and safety to those around him. If the financial trouble remains, he must deliberately practice radical generosity, giving what little he can spare to those who desperately need it, thus creating the positive consequence for his next cycle. He is not trying to earn a better future. He is actively creating it by rewriting the fundamental eternal script of his soul, one compassionate choice at a time. The weight of the past is immense, but the power of the present is truly infinite. The moment you understand that your soul is an eternal energy, moving through countless forms, learning and balancing its own vast accounts, the small petty anxieties of the day begin to shrink to their proper, minuscule size. You realize that the person who wronged you today might have been the one you desperately wronged in a previous incarnation, and the person whose face immediately shines with love might have been a cherished brother from another time. You stop asking the empty, despairing question, "Why me?" and start asking the only question that truly matters. What essential lesson must I learn right now, in this interaction, and what cause, what seed of karma am I setting in motion today for the eternity that follows? Theodore's calculated greed taught Elias the horrific price of suffocation and indifference. Elara's selfless sacrifice taught him the eternal, quiet power of grace and service, and the cumulative, multi-life experience taught him the singular, terrifying, yet deeply comforting truth. You are not a cosmic accident. You are a masterpiece of consequence, a living echo of every good and bad choice you have ever made. The next chapter of your soul's journey is being written right now, in the stillness of your heart, in the choices you make when no one is watching, and in the kindness you extend even when you feel you have nothing left to give. The life after death isn't a vague religious promise. It is the inevitable mathematical dawn that follows the sunset of this very life, shaped entirely and perfectly by the karma you are generating in this precise, eternal moment. The call to action is not tomorrow, not next year, but right now. Choose wisely. Live beautifully, because every moment matters in the grand, unending account of the soul. If you love this story and want to hear more like it, please hit that subscribe button. It truly means the world to us and helps us grow. And hey, while you're at it, let's aim for 50 likes on this video. Help us smash that goal.